Ciao Vittorio, finalmente ci vediamo.
Good afternoon, welcome everybody. This is the first of a series of webinars that our lab Neuroscience and the Humanities decided to organize in order to address what we take to be a central aspect of our societies as we speak. It used to be like that even before the unfortunate COVID pandemic, but if possible, the pandemic COVID-19 has boosted, has amplified this progressive shift in our social interaction from the world of physical reality to the worlds of screen. This is the main reason why we decided to invite some prominent international scholars to tell us their point of view on the centrality of screens for our life. So I decided to start not because of some sort of narcissistic aspect, but just because this is the very first Zoom seminar that we are organizing. I wanted to be the guinea pig, and if something wrong would eventually happen, I was to be the sole bearer of these unfortunate events. In 2 weeks, we will have the great opportunity to attend to the webinar given by Professor Mauro Carbone. The title is Pandemic Effects, Philosophy Screens Face to the Screen New Deal. On the 3rd of February, it's always on Friday, always 5 p.m. GMT +1. Professor Ophelia De Roy will talk on why digital bubbles are a necessary part of the world. On the 4th of February, Professor Francesco Casetti will talk on the projection protection complex, screens, enclosures, and bubbles. On the 5th of March, Professor Manos Tsakiris on This Face Doesn't Exist, Artificial Intelligence and Fake Faces. On the 6th, in 2 weeks after, Professor Richard Grusing on pandemic mediation, screening COVID-19. On April, Professor Mark Hansen, the experiential impact of digital technology on social life and culture. And the last webinar will be given by Professor Caroline Christoph Bakargiev on digital PTSD with a question mark, screens, masks, art, and museum. This is the program, very interesting. I'm very much looking forward to the forthcoming talks. And now let me share my screen to begin with my presentation. The digital self-identity in the digital age. I chose this detail from St. Lucie by Francesco del Cossa, one of the most prominent painter of Scuola Ferrarese, because I think it unites vision with the hand and with movement, which is going to be one of the feature of my approach on our responses to images in the first place, but also to digital images. This is going to be the outline of my talk. Who are we? The experience and presence of others. How do we embody others? The digital mediascape, just some few elements that I think can be said to characterize this huge topic that we will analyze more in details throughout all the talks that will compose this series of webinars. The digital self with a question mark. Are we entitled to speak of a digital self, particularly so in the present pandemic times, and then some temporary conclusions. Who are we, as you may easily understand, is the question. It's not just one question, but what I take to be the question for us human beings that we keep on asking ourselves from the very beginning. And there are endless ways to address this question. My very humble attempt is to address this question from a very specific angle, in an attempt, so to speak, to naturalize this question. I think that one way to speak about ourselves as human beings is to see humans as the result, the outcome of a very complex interaction between environment, culture, and the brain body. The central nervous system, I always imply the body wire to. And in this attempt, I would like to briefly focus on four aspects that we can employ to characterize this complex interaction between environment, culture, and the brain body. Our neotenic nature, the presence of epigenetic mechanisms that were totally unknown when I was studying as a medical undergraduate student, the coevolution between gene and culture, neuroplasticity, and experience. By neoteny, neosteinen, tending to youth, people mean the slowed or delayed physiological and somatic development of an organism. Human postnatal brain growth and maturation happen within a world of social bodily relations. This is crucial. I mean, we do not develop within a pneumatic void, so to speak, but our development, in particular, the development of our brain, is determined by the quantity and quality of interpersonal relations that we might entertain. As you see, the development of the cortical gray matter is prolonged for many years, and we could say that altogether the brain reaches a certain degree of completion of its adult maturation not earlier than 18, 20 years of age. This is a schematic view of how our brain looked like. If you cut a slice through the neocortex, this is when we are born, and this is the image you would get if you would be looking at your brain when you are 24. As you see, there is an increase, particularly of the complexity of the connections among the different neurons, which is beautifully described by the complexity of the apical dendrites that is reached when we are in young adulthood, and to be compared with the neural equipment we come into the world with. So our delayed postnatal development is largely dependent, as I was saying before, on the quantity and quality of interpersonal relations we as individuals are able to establish with our adult peers. So human neoteny, one can add, further supports the crucial role played by embodiment in allowing humans to engage in social relations and make sense of others' behavior. And this is a serious blow against a solipsistic modeling of the human individual and of its development. Furthermore, neoteny plays a crucial role in the development of human culture because it amplifies and prolongs learning processes, and it potentiates family relationship. Stronger family relationship in turn potentiate the possibility to transfer knowledge across generations, helping to build oral tradition, which in turn promote cultural practices. Let me turn to epigenetics, something I didn't learn at the university when I was studying genetics and biology. Again, from the Greek epi, above, and genetikos, something relating to family inheritance. By epigenetic, we mean the changes affecting the phenotype in the absence of genotypic change. It studies all the heritable modifications that vary gene expression while not altering the DNA sequence. So, to put it simply, it's not the DNA that changes, it is its expression that changes, and it changes specifically because of the impact then our meeting with the world, our experience of the world feedbacks on how our genes regulate their expression. So this is again a serious argument against the obsolete and that we should leave behind rigid dichotomy, rigid distinction between nature and culture. To the extent that our experience affects our nature, I think we could leave this rigid wall separating culture from nature behind us. Gene culture coevolution is also another very interesting aspect, and I'm asking you to bear in mind all of these factors that contribute to make us who we are, and to transpose them in the new environment, which is the digital mediascape. Genes and cultures are both inheritable and interacting, of course. Genetics determines what an individual can learn during development. Culture modifies natural selection by acting on the environment. We are particularly good in building niches. We build niches enabling us to inhabit places in the world that many animals would not survive in. Culture amplifies our human potential to create and modify our niches because a cultural trait is shared or homogeneously presented by large sections of the population and in different environments. Cultural transmission and adaptation are, of course, much faster than biological ones. And this led Lalan to say, culture is not just a property. Can you still hear me? Is it okay? Can you hear me and see
Yes.
me?
Vittorio, yes.
Yes, yes.
Good. Culture is not just a property of humans. It is a fundamental cause of how humans got to be the way they are, a dynamic process that shapes psychological and material worlds. Human minds have evolved specifically to exploit the cultural realm. And finally, let me quickly tell you something about neuroplasticity. The brain, also our brain as adults, is highly plastic and can therefore undergo functional and structural changes dictated by the external environment. We distinguish two kinds of plasticity, early and late plasticity. Early plasticity phenomena occur immediately after a substantial environmental change or behavior and are reversible. If I kept moving my index finger in such a way for 30 minutes, and you were lately to map the extension of the index finger in my primary motor cortex, you would realize that this mapping got enlarged to shrink back to its normal dimension a few minutes after I quit repeating this movement. Late plasticity phenomena occur more slowly, and they are taken to be irreversible. They are due to structural changes in neuronal synapses induced by persistent neuromodulatory and receptor changes. So now, let me, having given you this very quick and gross overview of some of the factors that make us who we are, let me move to the topic of the experience and presence of others. If I had to designate what an experience is, at present, my candidate definition is this one that I have taken from John Dewey, book on art as experience that he published in 1934. Begin quote, the red emphasis is mine. Experience is the result, the sign, and the reward of that interaction of organism and environment, which, when it is carried to the full, is a transformation of interaction into participation and communication. So, not all forms of interaction qualify as genuine experience. In order to be qualified as experience, they have to be carried to the full, transforming the interaction into something else, into something fuller, a participation and a form of communication. We can entertain different sorts of contacts with the world and with the world of others. Hans Gumbrecht, in The Production of Presence, What Meaning Cannot Convey, a book that influenced me quite a lot, in 2004 wrote, every human contact with the things of the world contains both a meaning and a presence component. Cognitive science in the last century focused mainly, if not predominantly, with the meaning component. Very little has been devoted to the investigation of how do we experience the presence of images, how do we experience the presence of others, while this has been characterizing my research in the last 20 years or so. So how do we embody others? Let me be clear, embodiment covers just one aspect of our potential relations with the world, and in particular with the world of others. So I am not at all implying that all there is in intersubjectivity is intercorporeality. My point is different. Intersubjectivity is scaffolding upon intercorporeality, which is the first, provides the first principal bricks to build a more and more nuanced and cognitively sophisticated way of making sense of the world, and in particular of the world of others. And in that respect, we are using inference, logic, language, so much so forth. But we cannot leave out of the picture the body. So I want to focus for the next few minutes on the intercorporeal side of intersubjectivity, and I'll do it by introducing what really steered our empirical research in Parma from something totally unrelated to intersubjectivity. We were studying how the brain maps spaces, how the brain controls our interaction with manipulable object, and by mere chance, serendipitously, we discover this novel property of the motor system, which, in two words, enable
io mamma sto facendo la cosa
not just to perform
alle 5:20 non posso venire no, un altro giorno.
correlated action, but it also reacts when these same actions are witnessed, because they are performed by someone else. So a mechanism that links agent and observer, they both share the same neural mechanism. The motor system is not only to enable us to move, it is also employed to map the movement of others. Much more recently, our German colleagues at the University of Tübingen were interested in addressing this question. How mirror neurons will react if the macaque is exposed not to the action of a physical agent performing the action just in front of the macaque, but is observing the action on the bidimensional digital computer monitor. The results of this experiment are quite interesting. They show that the vast majority of the neurons respond to both. Half of them with equal intensity, they respond both. The orange curve refers to the response of the neuron when the agent is physically present in front of the macaque. The black curve when the macaque watches the action displayed on the bidimensional computer screen. Half respond with equal strength. The remaining half prefers, so to speak, they discharge more intensely to the naturalistic action, but they still keep a very strong, significant response to the televised representation of the image. Incidentally, something people don't think about enough. When we speak of the results of cognitive neuroscience, all the experiments, fMRI experiments that are done, asking volunteers to enter the fMRI scanner, and these experiments are done in order to understand how possibly our brain enable us to entertain an experience of the world. Well, all these experiments do not present to the brain of the participants the real world, the physical world, but a bidimensional representation of the world where an actor pretends to experience something, performs action on a bidimensional screen. So the knowledge that we are gathering on how the brain maps reality is obtained by offering to the brain a representation, a digital representation of the world. This is something that I think we should keep in mind. But just to come back briefly to this experiment is telling us that the primate brain, even well before, about 20 million years before the invention of language, is treating physical reality and its digital representation in a similar way. In our brain, these are the parietal and frontal areas that are active when we execute, when we observe, but also when we imagine correlated actions, communicative, symbolic action, or mere bodily movement. But this is not the whole story. A long time ago, with Alvin Goldman, we ventured out on a limb to speculate, to hypothesize that possibly mirroring of action with just one instantiation of a broader, more basic mechanism that our brain is using to make sense of what's happening. We hypothesized that similar mirroring mechanism could be detected also in the domain of emotion and sensation, and this turned out to be the case. I'm just presenting you very few quick example of this. This is the anterior insula that turns out to be active both when I feel subjective disgust, but also when I witness the disgust of someone else as expressed by his or her facial mimicry. Similarly, in the domain of sensation, the very same parts of our brain that are normally activated with some part of our body is being touched, turn out to be activated also when we are observing tactile experiences on the very same body parts on the body of someone else we are looking at. So from 205 onwards, I try to provide tentatively a coherent theoretical framework to make sense of all these different sources of empirical evidence. And I came up with the idea of calling this model embodied simulation. As I said, a basic mechanism of our brain that, according to the hypothesis, enable us to grasp the meaning of many actions, emotions, feelings of others in a particular way, from within. We never said that all that it takes to understand others is a bunch of firing mirror neurons in our brain. We would be foolish to entertain this idea. There is a huge variety of cognitive solution to the problem of others, to understanding others. This is just one, the most basic one, probably phylogenetically and ontogenetically speaking, the oldest one, but which, if compared with the other ways of making sense of others, has a unique property. It enables us to understand others from within, with a sort of Einfühlung, feeling feeling inside. I mean, the experiential quality of the type of understanding that can be accomplished through the activation of this mechanism is completely different, in my opinion, from the type of understanding that can be accomplished by relying on the standard cognitive tools that philosophy of mind, particularly in the analytic camp, has analyzed, described, and discussed in the last 70 or 80 years or so. Because thanks to the activation of this mechanism, we recognize motor goals, intention, emotion, and sensation without necessarily having to use inferential reasoning in linguistic format. Perhaps, if you allow me the expression, what we use is some sort of bodily inferences. So let me now turn to the digital mediascape. This is the nice cartoon that I taken from the New Yorker that depicts the landscape of our places, particularly since the beginning of the pandemic. This pandemic has revealed something some of us might have been aware even before, but it radicalized it. It brought it to an extreme. It showed us how dependent we all are on digital technologies, which, on the one hand, allow us to maintain social connection. It would have been great to have you all physically present in Parma and then go having a nice aperitif followed by a nice dinner in our city. This is not possible, but nevertheless, it doesn't preclude us the possibility to gather, to meet, to discuss. However, on the other hand, digital technologies are perceived as incapable of guaranteeing a sufficient experience of presence in social relations, but not only in social relations, in education, in culture, and even in entertainment. And if we are to address these topics, I think the guiding compass should be aesthetics. Why am I saying so? Because I think we live in the most aesthetic time human beings ever knew. We live literally in a world that has been aestheticized. And here I'm referring to aesthetics in the broader possible sense, following, for example, the American philosopher Mark Johnson, who in 2018, in the Aesthetics of Meaning and Thought, wrote, begin quote, aesthetics extends broadly to encompass all the processes by which we enact meaning through perception, bodily movement, feeling, and imagination. In other words, all meaningful experience is aesthetic experience in the sense, in the etymological sense, a sensus knowledge, knowledge acquired through the sensory motor elements. So aesthetics is one key access point to the understanding of how digital technologies shape our identity, our social relationship, and the world in which we live. This is the point I want to discuss with you today. The digital disintermediation of perception and of the creation of meanings operated by the new media environment have literally aestheticized the world. Aesthetics indeed pervades all forms of social cognition. The impact that these new digital technologies and the practices, the social practices that these digital technologies have on people's lives and on society are still poorly studied from an empirical point of view, from my empirical point of view. Let me quote one of the forthcoming speakers in this series of webinars, Mark Hansen, already 20 years ago, in his seminal book, Embodying Technesis, wrote, begin quote, just as technological modernization produces a shift in the mode of experience from Erfahrung to Erlebnis, it also brokers a shift in the medium of experience, from non-sensus linguistic correspondences to embodied and practical mimetic activity. What one recent critic, Tausig, aptly calls contact sensuosity. New digital technologies put a new bodily, non-linguistic visuality at the center of our experience of the world. The digital technological modernization brings the body back at the center of the relationship with the reality, increasingly mediated by performatively perceived digital audiovisual simulacra. I think it should have already transpired from the first half of my talk, the emphasis I put on the social nature of human intelligence. I mean, I'm definitely against any solipsistic view of human intelligence. I think we are social creatures. I even have difficulty in identifying the social part of the brain. I think the whole brain is social by definition because we are social individuals from the very beginning, already in utero, and we show that. Okay, so the world is relation, but how is this type of social relation change, if it is changed, by the introduction of digital technologies? I think, well, first of all, I'm not apocalyptic. I'm not among those systematically bashing a new technology or a relatively new technology as soon as it appears. I mean, we have seen that from the Plato's cavern, practically, or perhaps even earlier on, but we don't have written documents testifying that, but most likely even in Paleolithic cavern, someone might have raised his finger about this new habit of painting bison instead of chasing them outside of the cavern. So this is an old story. And I think in light of this kind of biocultural turn, this paradigm shift we are all experiencing, of which I'm a full supporter, I think there is a cognitive continuity between these two tools, these two objects, this Paleolithic amygdala and this smartphone, because they are all expression of our nature, and our nature is to be technological animals. And I think in that respect, a very interesting contribution comes from a French philosopher, Gilbert Simondon. He was a pupil both of Georges Canguilhem and Merleau-Ponty. And in the 50s, he was writing incredibly modern things on our relations to objects and technology. According to Simondon, technology exceeds any narrow utilitarian purpose. Technology is a network of relations, he writes. It is what mediates between humankind and nature. I think this book, Du mode d'existence des objets techniques, was the book into which he turned his PhD dissertation. The technical object, wrote in the 50s, Simondon, understood according to its essence, becomes the support and the symbol of that relation we want to call trans-individual. By the intermediary of the technical object, an interhuman relation is thus created that forms the very model of trans-individuality. more than 50 years before the notion of entanglement that quite recently Jan Hodder, the archaeologist, put forward. He never quoted Simondon, probably because he wasn't aware of him. So Homo duplex is a Durkheim expression. We are duplex at least in two ways, because self and other are reciprocally connected and interdependent. And now we know that even at the subpersonal level of description of cognitive neuroscience. But in an even more interesting way, there is another self-related duplicity worth being explored here, the relation of the self to the parallel worlds of representation. Paleolithic art, chimerical objects, stories, then the transition from orality to literacy, printing books, photographs, cinema, television, mobile phone, virtual reality, and God knows what's coming next. But all these parallel worlds betrays our profound, deep insatisfaction with the physical world. We are not happy with just the world we inhabit. We are not happy to build, to change it. We must be also cosmogonic creatures. So we feel obsessed to create parallel worlds with images and through worlds. Now we introduce a further element into this obsession in building parallel worlds, the parallel worlds of the digital technology. The introduction of the new digital technology overthrows, perhaps, language from the role played so far as the dominant carrier of the experience of reality, putting a new bodily, non-linguistic visuality at the center of our experience of the world. The digital technological modernization paradoxically brings the body back at the center of the relationship with the reality, which is increasingly mediated by digital interactive visual representation. Here is another distinguished member of our panel of speakers, Francesco Casetti, in the Lumiere Galaxy, 7 Keywords for the Cinema to Come, 2015, he wrote, begin quote, the concept of relocation makes clear that the migration of a medium outside its prior terrain involves a type of experience in a physical or technological space. In our recent book, The Empathic Screen, Cinema and Neuroscience, Michele Guerra and I wrote that the 21st century, thanks to the advent of digital technology and the so-called new social media, brought with it a post-cinematographic and post-television conception of the spectator based on a substantial doubling of mobility, which arises not just as a virtual mobility of the viewer's gaze on the screen, but also and mainly because of the actual mobility of the vision devices that can be held in the hand and carried around. The moving images have come to move even outside their habitat. They have spread everywhere on trains, airplanes, everywhere, easily adapting to the new viewing rhythms in new experience rituals. The digital technology brings with it many things. Here I want to provocatively just have a few snapshots of what the digital revolution is bringing along and let you think how this might affect our identity, our subjectivity. Deep face. What is deep face? It's a learning facial recognition system that was created by Facebook, and it was created by feeding to this algorithm our faces, 3 or 4 million of faces that unknowingly all Facebook users donated to the company in order to train this algorithm that is able to identify human faces in digital images. It employs a 9-layer neural net with over 120 million connection weights organized as a Siamese network. Don't ask me how a Siamese network works. because I had the faintest idea. And as I said, it was trained on 4 million images uploaded by us, by Facebook users. Science fiction normally gets it right with a few decades of advance, and science fiction, as you mentioned, a world dominated by intelligent digital video surveillance, and this is probably not a dystopia anymore, but it describes what's going on as we speak. So control systems that are, by bridging artificial intelligence, facial recognition networks with enormously powerful AI, they're able to recognize people by their face or even by their style of bodily movement on the spot. And these sort of things are common practice in China, and more often they are, for example, the Metropolitan Police in London have placed some of this camera outside of the main metro tube station in London, and they eventually were able also to detect people on the run and arrest them. Thanks to the algorithm of facial and body action recognition, artificial intelligence can be applied to biometric big data, employing the analysis of this big data in the recognition of faces and behaviors, transforming our social practices into a sort of nightmarish, scopic aesthetic regime in which our privacy disappears. Anytime I have to fill a privacy form, I don't know whether to start laughing or getting mad on the completely useless practice in the face of all that is happening outside these forms. But these algorithms are important because with an easy jump, we move from deep face to deep fake. All these faces are unreal. I won't say more because we will have a specific talk by Manos Tsakiris on this specific issue. Fake news. Science dedicated its cover in 2018 on how lies spread. On social media, false news beats the truth. They travel faster and they diffuse much more than the truth. Why? Because people are more likely to share them. And why that? Because false stories inspire fear, disgust, surprise, while true stories inspire anticipation, sadness, joy, and trust. They are much more boring. This is one of the reasons why we human beings, not just bots, human beings in flesh and bones, cooperate in the diffusing, in spreading fake news more than the true ones. The late Italian philosopher Remo Bodei, a few years ago, wrote, "We now have the impression that politics has become a fiction, a capillary, scientifically organized construction of a parallel reality of which the individual fake news are nothing but bricks, where matrices of prepackaged ideas and emotions operate. Through retouching and continuous updating, they produce a climate of opinion meteorologically changeable. How much complicit silence, how many lies can a democracy tolerate without perverting?" And the news, the daily news testify how relevant these questions are for understanding the world we live. We live in an aestheticized world. On top, you have Venice, the Vegas version of Venice. Below, you see the real Venice. I put two arrows connecting the two because this Venice is looking more and more, or trying hard to look more and more like its iconic replica for casino boards. Cities of art are transformed into their advertised iconic appearance. This has strong bearing on people's life. Venice now is inhabited by a population of permanently living there around 50,000. It used to be 4 times bigger not long ago. But the same applies to changes, not just to our psychology, but to our physical body. People modify more and more their face and body to mimic alleged standards of beauty. Here I picked Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, which are actually the result of cosmetic surgery, in a sense, real simulacra in flesh and blood. I don't have time to go deeper into that, but then talking about social practices, one of the key metaphors that have been used in aesthetics to talk about our relationship with the artistic images, haptic vision. Do you remember Berenson claimed that Giotto is greater than Cimabue because his paintings have a stronger haptic quality? Now we have literal performative haptic vision because of the introduction of the touch screen. The evolution of the reproduction of digital images has allowed the miniaturization of screens so that the images are prêt-à-porter. And from 2007 onwards, that's the dividing line, the introduction of this object, the iPhone, a substantial portion of our visual world has literally been sucked under the surface of a multiplicity of portable screens. And last year, John Thompson, who's a media sociologist, wrote, communication media should not be analyzed on their own in terms of their intrinsic properties, but should be analyzed in relation to the forms of action and interaction which the use of communication media brings into being. And as I said, even in film theory, particularly thanks to phenomenology and feminist thought, the film has been seen also from its bodily, almost tactile quality. The Skin of the Film is a very famous book published by Laura Marx, I think in 2000 or around that age. But now we have a literal techno body prosthesis, what I designate as the skin screen. Because the touch screen enable us to have images always at our fingertips. The images, be that still or moving from remote that they were, have entered forcefully inside our peripersonal space. And this is not a space like all other kind of spaces. It's the pragmatic space, it's the space of practognosia, as Merleau-Ponty would have put it, is the space of proxemics, culturally defined. It's the space we are mostly jealous of. It's the space that we now need to protect and defend from the possible intrusion of the virus. So it's a heavily charged, heavily emotionally charged space. And if you think about it, most of our scopic performances occur, particularly for digital natives, within this peripersonal space. The screen is no longer just a transparent medium. When I go to the movies, I don't see the screen, I see the movie. When I turn on my TV, I don't see the television set. I see, again, what I'm looking at. Here, it's not like that. Every time I touch the screen from transparent that it was, it becomes instantaneously opaque. It is a techno-body prosthesis, since it's the body that constitutes performatively and in an analogical way the triggering and stopping engine of the digital reproduction of images through the contact with our fingers on the screen. And this, of course, raises a lot of questions that I hope to be able to empirically address in the coming months or years. How much do bodily contact with the screen condition our vision of the images? How does the intermittent opacification of the screen makes it present as such modulate our responses as spectators? How much does it affect our empathic connection with the relocated fictional narratives they interact with? let me come to the conclusion of my talk on the digital self with a question mark. If you are with me, if you bear with me with the premises of my talk, what are the elements that contribute in making us who we are, neoteny, so the type of relation we entertain with others from the very beginning, that for digital natives are likely different from that people of my generation entertain. The young daughter of a friend of mine, that was an anecdote told me by Michele Guerra, saw a magazine sitting on the table. She put her fingers on this colorful page, opening the two fingers, then staring at the mom and said, "Mom, it doesn't work." She was expecting the image to get enlarged, the image on the paper of the magazine, because she's used to the skin screen, so to speak. So are we entitled to address the topic of the self from this point? Just a few quick elements for discussion. As personal life experiences, education, news, entertainment, they all share the same digital platforms. They are all imbued, funneled through this medium device. Many attitudes are transversally tuned to the emotional quality, to the level of arousal, to the intensity of the aesthetic style of communication that prevails in the digital mediatic arena. I think it is an illusion to believe that once we leave the device on the table and we go out, or we forget about that, we simultaneously switch off all that has been absorbed deeply in our implicit memories, in our emotional state. We carry it with us perpetually. Let me quote briefly Primo Levi from one of what I take to be is one of his masterworks, The Drown and the Safe. He's speaking about language. What we commonly mean by understand coincide with simplify. Without a profound simplification, the world around us would be an infinite, undefined tangle that would defy our ability to orient ourselves and decide upon our action. In short, we are compelled to reduce the knowable to a schema. With this purpose in view, we have built for ourselves admirable tools in the course of evolution, which are the specific property of the human species: language and conceptual thought. Well, if I think about that, which tell us also that experience enormously exceeds the words that we are able to translate it into. Similarly, the development of technology is producing something that I don't have a word for that, but I tentatively try to define this as the conceptualization of action. I recently changed my car. I used to have an old Volvo, and every time I wanted to brake the vehicle, I had to perform this stereotypical action. Not anymore. My new Volvo removed the standard way of braking the vehicle. Instead, I need to push a button. I perform the very same action that I have to perform, not to brake the vehicle, but to start the engine. So many differently expressive and with different purposes action are now conceptualized into the very same gesture. Getting money, going up to the first floor on the elevator, starting a car, braking the car, having a coffee, they all translate into the common action of pressing a button. This stereotypical translation of our bodily expression might have an impact on our psychology too in the long run. I think this is something that I never read about, and I'm starting to think about it. Is one dimension of technology that I haven't seen being addressed, maybe because of my ignorance. So the digital mediascape transforms intersubjectivity into the compulsive repetition of digital practices, which eventually may lead to a sort of anesthesia of the self. Digital interpersonal relation, as the relation we are entertaining now as I speak, exactly through this technology that you see portrayed in this image, which is a reflection of myself and of yourself. Well, recently, some Japanese colleagues asked themselves, what about the emotional reaction of people watching someone in front of them when compared to its digital image online on a computer screen? And it turns out that people provide valence rating, arousal rating higher to the live physical encounter with the other with respect to the digitally mediated encounter. And the same occurs with the reaction of their facial muscles. They are much less attuned with the emotion of the other in terms of activation of their facial zygomaticus muscle when they see the other laughing, or the corrugator when they see the other expressing a negative emotion with respect to the digital other. So this is a very preliminary study along this line that is trying to confront the presence of the other as physically present versus the digital version of the other. It is not easy to be done because if the other is physically present, it's hard to be standardized, the presentation in terms of stimuli. So this is one of the reasons why there are so few studies comparing the two. So every technological revolution also implies a cognitive revolution. The advent of smartphones and the parallel development of social media and the related subsidiary applications have literally shifted the balance towards a mediated and represented reality to the detriment of the factual presence and performative relationship with the physical bodies of others. And this is particularly true for the younger generation, the so-called digital natives. The staging of life to document it and share it by making it public literally transforms life into a staging. So the impression is that to many people, they go places, they do things not just to enjoy the experience, but to enjoy the publicity of the representation of the experience once it gets shared on social media. Digital mediation adds a level of narcissistic reflection to the self by electing its shared digital image as the main referent in the relationship with the world of others. The digital identity is more and more representative of who we think we really are. The new aesthetic regime produced by the digital revolution, the aesthetic world, is radically changing the style of our relations and the mechanism for building personal identity, I guess. And neuroscience can play an important role in focusing on issues related to the self in the digital age, only some of which I briefly mentioned in my talk. Now we are living a sort of paradoxical experiment where the invisible, this guy, which is visible only through human technology, has totally reconfigured the visible. The social city landscape, our social landscape has radically changed since February 2020. There are negative emotions prevailing related to the pandemic, fear, anxiety, and their normal outcome, anger. Again, I don't need to mention the daily news to make it clear. Our life is transformed into, as Rocco Ronchi, an Italian philosopher, defined it, a sort of Brechtian estrangement. Every single act of our daily routine has been verified, inspected before leaving our place. Did I bring out the sanitizer? Did I bring along the facial mask? Do I wear it properly? Did I disinfected my hands before removing it? Did I clean the shopping bag? And again and again and again and again. Everything has to be analyzed and scrutinized. And even when we are free to leave our place and we are outside, we live an experience that in my imagination brings me to this, to Full Metal Jacket, the boot camp initial part of the movie, where very creatively Stanley Kubrick, using the dolly, gives the impression of this regimentation of space, of distances, just to convey the power that is supposed to turn this young man into killing machines to be deployed in Vietnam in the second half of the movie. So we risk a true depersonalization of the other, particularly boosted by the contingencies of this pandemic we are not through yet, particularly also because we are prevented some basic information telling us more about the other, his state, his or her emotions. So, and I'm done. The growing autonomy of the digital world colonizes more and more our imagination while simultaneously outsourcing our memories. The world we relate to from our screens, following us everywhere, shapes our take on reality, our social relations, and our identity. The intercorporeality implied by the model I briefly proposed to you, embodied simulation, I think may constitute a useful starting point to analyze the mode of presence that characterizes the digital mediascape, hints to shed new light on our responses to it. Neuroscience can help us, together with all the disciplines represented in this series of webinars we are going to have, can help us deconstructing and understanding the ways in which the body interfaces with the so-called real world, if this definition is still meaningful, and with the digitized version of it. It can reveal some of the rule of the game, providing tools to design new contexts and new forms of mediation. And with this, I'm really done. Thank you for your attention. And now I would like to open the discussion, if I can enable everyone. If I
Perhaps we should unmute personally. Do you hear me, Vittorio?
Can you individually habilitate your mic? Can you unsilence yourself and turn it on?
Yes.
I'm open for any question if someone is willing to ask question now.
Hi, Vittorio. This is Mauro Carbone. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Anyone?
Do you hear us actually?
Sorry, I had my speakers off.
Vittorio,
Yes.
are you hearing me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this so rich and provocative presentation. There would be many aspects of it I would like to discuss with you, but there is first of all a point. In two parts of your presentation, you stressed that new media, digital revolution, and so on, opened us the experience of a non-linguistic visuality. Hmm?
That's a
This is-
partial view.
This is my point. Why could you develop, could you make me understand clearer why you speak of non-linguistic visuality? We live in times in which we spend all our time in replying emails. You show us a PowerPoint in which images and words are mixed. Someone like Kevin Kelly in his book The Inevitable speaks of the migration of the words from the book to the screen. Aren't we in an epoch of hybridization of the linguistic and non-linguistic visualities? And this is maybe one of the main stake of the cognitive revolution you are speaking of.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important question. Thank you for asking it. I need to better clarify my point. I'm not maintaining that new digital technologies have obscured language. As you say, probably we haven't written as many words as we are doing now in the time of chat, messaging, email, and the like. The point is that many of these words are devoted to comment on images. Think about the recent events that happened in Washington, D.C. I mean, all the words are commenting those specific images of the guy with the horn, the other people. I mean, these images are everywhere, and tons, zillions of words are devoted to comment specifically those images. It's true that the system is evolving, and for example, I was reading an article during the weekend commenting the enormous success enjoyed by this Netflix movie on Mankiewicz. And I think that the journalist was properly stating that the vindication of script writers put at the center of the stage a character that 20 or 30 years ago probably would have not been picked as to be the protagonist of a movie, someone who writes the script. Why that? Because narrative is moving from books to TV series. So this new ecological system of narrativity through seriality is more and more dependent on good scripts. The beginning of the history of cinema was the script. The first teaching of cinema, I think at Columbia in New York, how to write a good movie script. And so it's true that it's false that language is totally out of the scene. But in different ways, in different forms, I wanted to focus specifically on images because I think that images win greatly over words in the social media. I'm fully convinced of that. So I think.
Sorry, just a little point about that. You are right. Images are absolutely essential, but as I don't know, Deleuze says, words make us see images. You see what I mean? if you think of fake news, of memes, for instance, you have an image and you have some words orienting your way of seeing and of understanding the image.
No, I see your point, but I think that the language that we are experiencing now, which is more and more a language within phototextuality, is radically modulated, modified. Our take of those words is dramatically changed by the juxtaposition with images. So that's why I think phototext, image textuality is another key area of investigation in the year to come. And indeed, what we are witnessing is a steadily increase of phototextual forms of mediation. I don't think you can relate to language when coupled with images, with digital images, in the same way as you would relate to language as such. It is not the same language. I don't take it to be the same. At least this is my, maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I believe and what I would like to empirically test, if possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
I may ask a question?
Sure, please.
So my name is Giacomo Cavalli. I work on epigenetics actually, so I'm not really an expert.
I hope I didn't say too many, I didn't make too many mistakes.
No. No, I was struck by one thing you were mentioning about this Japanese study where they compared reactions to visual inputs either through video or in presence. And you were mentioning that the reaction is stronger if you have the physical presence, which is nice. But there's something that I noticed. Maybe I think actually the sample is way too small to conclude to be significant. But I had the clear impression that the breadth of the reaction, the variance of the reaction was much bigger in the physical. So that it's not just a matter of how much, but also that the video input makes people react in a more similar way compared to the physical presence. So in some cases, maybe you react even less.
You're right. It's hard to determine by inspecting it. One should look carefully to the figures. But
yeah, it's just something that comes to my mind, because when you mention of all these, the media presence, it's mostly audio visual, and so you're still missing a lot of senses. Even like you mentioned haptics, but haptics doesn't replace tactile feelings really, and so you're missing basically the tactile experience. You also lose the odor perception, and even things like perceiving, for instance, the temperature of the air or of the odors that you're smelling. So there's many things that you're missing. And so maybe this compresses the span of the range of the reactions you can have.
It makes it more stereotyped. That's
more stereotyped.
Awesome.
Can I say something, Vittorio, on this point? So thank you very much for your presentation. I had also some comments about this Japanese study, because you said, well, the study shows that we are less reactive to the online images compared to the physical interactions. Yes, but on the other hand, I was wondering, there must be some things, I mean, some that we inhibit. I mean, the physical interactions can be very frightening, for example, can be very dangerous, and so there must be some routine that we don't activate during the online interaction that may also have positive effects. like being more trustful, for example, because we are less scared. So, do you think that there can only be negative consequences?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think you're right, and I hope I didn't give the impression that my very crude characterization, forcefully, with the amount of time available of the digital world and of the aestheticization of the world only in negative terms. I think we lose many things. We probably gather other things, and I said I'm not among the apocalyptic blaming the new technology as we experienced already in our history. I'm totally open. I think that when everything gets compressed to that, as we are experiencing since February, in the long run, I think I see more negative aspects than positive ones, not because of the technology in itself, but if this is the only way enabling us to have a social contact with others, I think it underlines some of the things that if properly blended with the physical interaction with the other, don't pose big problems or even have positive aspects. But if everything boils down to this digitally mediated interaction, then I think our sociality, I don't know if it's going to be a better or worse, but it will radically be different. What I'm trying to pinpoint is that nothing will be the same after the digital revolution. I think like nothing was the same after the introduction of A, B, C, and D, starting with the fire, moving onwards. I think digital technologies will change us and our life to a substantial degree. It's not to me to say whether in negative or positive terms. We don't know yet. We are in the middle of it.
Thank you.
Vittorio, actually following on this, I was thinking,
yes,
you know, we're talking about the digital age, of course, and you talked about it too, the fingertips, right? And this, I think, has more than a figurative sense. We literally have the world at our fingertips, each one of us. And I was thinking that you ended with the narcissism, this kind of new narcissism of this, enabled by this technology, which is also technology that enables communication. And I was wondering, maybe one area of investigation is this kind of to and fro interaction between a new forming narcissism, a new kind of socialization, how the self is redefining itself in that way via our fingertips. And what is this doing to our embodied simulation? What is embodied to that embodied interactions in the world? And what is that doing to our sense of self in relation to others? To go back even to the neoteny you started with.
Yeah, I mean, as you probably noticed, the second part of my talk was just question marks. I have no answer. These are questions I'm asking myself, and I think
me too.
Yeah.
I think many of us are. Yeah. I was thinking that. I was thinking maybe you could try to, if there were ways of even devising some forms of experiments. I mean, what could they be to try to study what is even happening to our emotional selves with this world at our fingertips that we have, and in their sense of the embodied self.
Also, I mean, the slight delay that we quite often experience in our social interaction with others when digitally mediated, I mean, all these tiny little glitches in our synchronicity with the other, which is a basic component of communication, of course, reminds me of the early experiment in the 60s of last century done by the pioneers of infant research like Ed Tronick. The neonate picks immediately when the televised image of the mother is likely delayed or anticipated with respect to an online communication, even when mediated through a video monitor. Back then, they had big monitors. So I think in the long run, also these little slips, if you see them in a cumulative way, in a way may engender the thought that, well, okay, you can let it go because it's, I don't know, just an impression, but the basic thing that is missing is that we don't share a space anymore. Each of us in these tiny little stamps, we each inhabit a space which is secluded from the space inhabited by each of us. And this, I think, is the biggest minus that we are experiencing when social communication occurs through digital mediation. While I think that in the case of digital screens, we are at the beginning, we are actually experimenting new ways, new creative ways with children, with radio children, to use a touch screen to develop their creativity. But that's another issue. If someone has more questions, please. And
yes,
please,
Anne.
yeah, please.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so very much. It's just my name, Anne, but I guess you know it's Anne Runenhoff you're talking with now.
Okay.
So I don't know why only my first name comes in. It has been in several Zooms, but never mind about that. Thank you so very much, Vittorio, for your extremely good presentation. I have noted so many things down and I have so many questions and ideas, but I will keep to one just now. First of all, I have to say that I happen to be married with my husband, who is a computer scientist and just works with deep learning and all that stuff. And he was one of the first to create, with his own company, speech recognition, you know, and that was in the beginning of the 2000s. So my simple question is actually, what would you say are faces really needed to shape emotions and experiences, or is it enough with just voices? Because experience, and in the beginning, of course, these voice recognitions were not that good, but now today they are. So it really sounds that you're talking to a real person, and people get emotional and people get involved and so on. Do you really need images with the voices, or what would you say about only voices? Would our brain also react to voices? With the mirror neurons and so on, would it react to the voices as it would, or would it actually need also faces? What would you say about that?
I think that when we experience the other synesthetically, so to speak, there are a variety of senses that cooperate in order to provide us with the sense of the other. Okay? The meaning. I use the sense because I think that the word sense has much to do with the senses, so to speak. When we shut one of these channels, for example, when we eliminate vision, it's not that it's our experience is hearing and vision, and now it's hearing minus vision. It's hearing without vision is not hearing with vision. It becomes a different kind of hearing, so to speak. So it's a kind of, it gets boosted. Your attention is more focused on the available sensory channel that you have. So you have more resources, so if you allow me the expression, to be allocated on hearing that you had when you had hearing and vision simultaneously, so to speak. So it's a different experience. I wouldn't say it's a richer or poorer experience, but definitely different. So I remember a long time ago, I was taking part to this conference organized by Zurich Polytechnic. So between lectures, they had this, what they call practical laboratory. I didn't allow myself to do a drumming experience at sunrise, but I allowed myself a walking experience in Cortona, blindfolded, guided by someone walking beside me, holding my arm for half an hour, going up, down staircases, under porches, empty places. And after a while, you realize you see many things just through your smell, through your hearing. So it's a different sort of experience.
Yes,
Not just hearing minus vision. Plus, there are some emotional qualities of our behavior, the way we gesture, our prosody in the voice, that are mapped.
Yes.
What Daniel Stern designated as forms of vitality. They are mapped by a particular brain area, no matter what sensory channel conveys them. Be it voice prosody, gestural style, they all hit this mediodorsal insula. So I think it's
the mediodorsal, exactly. Yeah. May I just to continue a little bit? Thank you for that. Absolutely. But what would you say out from your experience, your expertise? I want to say, like imagine you're looking at a video, a person talking. This person has a very lovely voice, but looks absolutely like not attractive. I mean, I don't have, I mean, what is attractive? That's relative, of course, but I guess you know what I mean. This person would not speak to you in a matter of way, like, and so that's well. And imagine on the other hand, you have only a speech, a voice, and the same beautiful voice, but without the image. So what people do, I mean, if you read novels and so on, you will see the persons. So this voice might like produce a picture of a very lovely person. So in the first place, this image and lovely voice might disturb actually your experience of the nice thing, because it's, yeah, you don't chemically connect, while the other without the picture might enhance your experience because you only hear the lovely voice and your brain will automatically put a face on this voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I mean, I just want to hear your ideas about that.
Well, I don't have any particular opinion on this since I don't have data. One thing that relates perhaps only peripherally to your question is something I kept asking myself of what's the voice I'm hearing when I'm reading a novel? And I asked the same question to all of my family members, to friends, to colleagues. It turns out that everyone come up with a different reply.
Yes.
There are people who never thought about that. Yeah. There are people who say, of course, it's my voice. There are other people that say if it's a female character, it's a female voice, and the other way around. My daughter told me, well, I never particularly paid attention to that, but as I saw a movie about the same plot, I said, that's not her voice. That's not the voice I figured while reading the novel. We don't know anything about that, literally. From the point of view of the brain body, we don't know anything. And that's very interesting because I think that tells you a lot about how idiosyncratic is our experience of the world. I think different people would come up with definitely with different answers.
Absolutely.
they experience things in a very different, radically different, potentially radically different way.
Absolutely. Might it be possible for you to have some experimental, I mean, to investigate that empirically more?
Well, in principle, I think you could play with the look and the voice and the combination of the two. Maybe someone did it. I'm not familiar with
I don't know
it,
either,
so I wouldn't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guido.
Yes, thank you very much, Vittorio, for your presentation. And the argument is very, very important and excellent. I have a question connected to the relation between conceptualization and technology, because you are indeed very true in saying that we are evolving a kind of thinking which is based on the use of those devices, and those devices do not only give us cognitive contents, they also push us towards a different way of thinking and of conceptualizing reality, because I am aware that if I push a button, I am able to gain some information, and I am able to make some mathematical operation and so on. So our way of thinking is radically changing, and our methodology of building knowledge, building cognitive contents is evolving and is changing a lot. Let me say, I don't think that the problem is just the lack of a generic relationship to others. I think the problem with the media, with the fake news, and particularly with the internet, is probably the absence of some authoritative guidance in our relationship with this sea of information which is represented by the internet. We probably need to evolve also a very different pedagogy, a very different education of the future generations, because there is now really a lack of some authoritative guidance in the use of internet, and the problem of the fake news is related to this point. And moreover, let me say another thing. I really think that we will have a very new type of human civilization and a very new type of man and woman, a very new type of human in the future. Like, for example, after the Renaissance, after the Enlightenment, we really discovered or rediscovered a new type of human being. For example, in the Renaissance, we discovered that we were able to be different from the humans in the Middle Age, just because we discovered many aspects that during the Middle Age were lost, like, for example, the importance of the humanity, or of the harmony and the arts and so on. And so we also had a revolution in our way of life after the Enlightenment, because we discovered the importance of the reason and of positive thinking. So, and probably we are going towards a definition of a new human being, and we are going also to need to rediscover the importance of education, of what Germans call die Bildung, so the formation of the human beings, because really we have with the internet we have a very precious, a very rich potentiality for the evolution of our civilization, but we need to really scrutinize and to select our way of interacting with this technology. So I would add to what you said and to your presentation, how that I would add that I think that we need not just to overcome the problem of lack of relationship or lack of others, because with the internet we are gonna have also relationships, maybe less relationships, but we are gonna have relationship with our for example relatives and so on, but probably we need to evolve some kind of high qualitative relationships with others in order to help us, in particular the future generation, to deploy for the best the digital technologies and the internet. So
yeah, I'm totally with you in the need of a new digital pedagogy that we don't see at the moment. Maybe digital natives will be the protagonist of this new digital Bildung, as you define it. It's something that we needed. There are attempts. A few weeks ago, I was reading a paper by a group of American psychologists. They came up with a game, and the game consisted in inventing fake news. So the students that took part in this game were less prone to fake news than those that were engaged in another game which didn't deal with fake news, which is another reiteration of the fact that you learn things by doing things, so to speak. Thank you. More questions? It's already 1 hour and almost 40 minutes. Thank you for your patience. If there are more questions, I'm ready to take them. Otherwise, I wish you a great evening, and we won't be able to enjoy a spritz together, but ideally I will. No more questions? Okay, so thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience and your attention and your very exciting question. We will reconvene ideally in this Zoom room in 2 weeks to attend to the next webinar given by Professor Carbone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.